Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hearth of Britannia and another Hearth of Britannia Dragonsmeet. I am Rustic Dragon, the proprietor of the Hearth of Britannia, your host and beardy bastard, here for your viewing pleasure. So today we've got some fun topics to cover. We're going to have a special guest in about an hour. We are going to have Unseen Dragon speak of the devil, there he is. We will have Unseen Dragon talking about the Unseen Order and his wonderful events, the Festivals of the Silver Serpent. Although sometimes the Fellowships of the Silver Serpent, just like Hobloth, they tend to have some naming identity problems. So we can talk about our respective identity crises with our events. That'll be fun. Before that, however, we will be continuing our meditation on the virtues, and we'll be talking about sacrifice. But before that, I have a couple housekeeping items. So those of you out there that, my tit itches, it's a titch. So those of you out there who back me on Patreon, thank you so much. You guys basically make it possible for me to do what I do without it breaking the bank. You guys pay for my hosting fees. You pay for all of those incidental expenses that comes with just the stuff that you forget about. That all comes from my Patreon. So huge thanks. And I want to give a special shout out to Phoenix, my newest backer on Patreon. Thank you, Phoenix. Phoenix is a longtime supporter of the Hearth, which I greatly appreciate. He may pop in later tonight. He may not. He is a Hearth regular. So I just wanted to thank him for that. Thank you so much. But those of you out there, definitely consider backing on Patreon. It only takes $1 to see my posts. It doesn't get you all of the participatory privileges, but it's only $1 to see my posts, which give you spoilers to the events. Just recently, a really fun spoiler went out that a lot of people seem to enjoy just last night. It's only $1. Give $1, you can see that. That also enables you voting privileges if you want to influence things like, for example, we voted on where Hobloth 4 would take place in Britannia. That's a great thing that we can do through Patreon. So please consider doing that, and know that it is tremendously appreciated. And one other housekeeping announcement. I finally did it. I put products on Facebook. This is outstanding, and this is exciting. So I've been wanting to put products on my own website for a while to get around eBay and their draconian 10% plus PayPal's pound of flesh that they take out of every transaction. Facebook, you can choose to use Stripe, which is a much smaller cut than PayPal is, and Facebook doesn't charge any fees on top of that. So if you are interested in buying any cool Hearth of Britannia merchandise, any of the cloth maps that you see back there, the Codex of Ultimate Wisdom, actually I'll have one of those bags close by, these cool ankh with the Lord British Snake on them, any of the event trinkets, they are on eBay, but please go to the Facebook page, facebook.com/Hearth of Britannia. You will save me so much money by going through Facebook. And also, I think PayPal is evil. So Facebook, please. It's there. It's available. And if you have any questions, of course, at any time, rusticdragon@gmail.com, which reminds me, those of you out there watching in YouTube land, if you want to say something and you can't get into the Hangout because it's full, you don't have a webcam, you're shy, whatever, rusticdragon@gmail.com. Send me an email. I'll get a notification, and I will read it on air. Additionally, if you're watching this later and you have comments on an episode that was many months or even years ago, send me an email anyway, rusticdragon@gmail.com. We will loop back to that topic, and we will read your thoughts. Input is always welcome. So any questions, let me know. And that being said, Beard Commander cannot be here as he is helping the missus with the kitchen. Well, that's good. Nice of you, David. That's a noble sacrifice that you're making right there. So Beard Commander can't be with us, but we've got 3 lovely people here in the Hangout with us. We have a beard, not a beard, and a pseudo beard. So let's start with the bearded one. Would you like to take a moment and say hello to everybody?
Hello, everyone. I am the bearded one. Now, I'm Joseph. I'm Unseen Dragon. It's great to see everyone, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. And I apologize to many people. I've been basically out of pocket getting ready for my event and dealing with work stuff, and will continue to be for the next week or so.
And if there's anyone on the planet who understands that, it's me, and you're 100% absolved of any responsibility or, feelings of guilt. Don't worry about it, but we're happy to have you here. And thank you for coming up for air to hang out with us tonight. I actually thought you'd come in an hour just to keep getting work done, so it's nice to see you early. All right, pseudo-bearded one.
Yes, also known as Bullion Dragon, one of the pseudo dragons from the Anne McCaffrey books. But anyway, good to be here. Missed the last few, so it's awesome. So hello, everybody. Hope you are doing well, and join us.
Join us. Come rabble with us. It's fun. The hangout's wide open. Those of you out there watching, jump on in. And last but not least, the lonely beardless one.
I know, I feel left out here. John Hosey, Houston Dragon. Good to see everybody, and definitely looking forward to the festival next week.
Excellent. And again, I'm Rustic Dragon, proprietor of the Hearts of Britannia. Let's talk about sacrifice. So again, unlike honesty the other day, where I had like a whole spiel ready to go, I really haven't meditated much on the other virtues. So I don't have much of a spiel to give about sacrifice. And I also don't know anyone else whose primary virtue is sacrifice, at least not in a healthy way. Scott Jones said to me that the meaning of life is to learn to make yourself happy without hurting others, and then learn to make others happy without hurting yourself. And there's a little bit more to that, but that's the general gist of it. And I think we've all run into people out there who make everyone else happy, but they totally hurt themselves. And it's possible to say that that person's core virtue is totally sacrificed, but it's not a healthy way. So I'm interested tonight in talking about what is healthy sacrifice, what's sacrifice to you, what does it mean to you, what does it mean to be sacrificial? We're not talking like, stabbing newborns on a harpy altar or something just outside of Trinsic. We're talking like, what is sacrifice in terms of capital S sacrifice, the virtue of sacrifice. And after we talk about that, the next question, of course, will be, how is sacrifice different from compassion? And when is it okay not to practice the virtue of sacrifice? So, and I think a lot of that's going to loop right back to what I said about Scott Jones' meaning of life. But yeah, let's talk about that. What is sacrifice? What is healthy sacrifice? What is virtuous sacrifice? When is it okay, not to be sacrificial? Do you guys, anyone at all, have any thoughts about this? And those of you out there watching, rusticdragon@gmail.com, please send in your thoughts.
I could offer something. And again, the difference between sacrifice and compassion, I mean, there's obviously some overlap there, but I guess we'll save that for later. But I think sacrifice, real sacrifice, is when you give something up, a part of yourself, whatever it is. It could be money, it could be time, it could be just thought, just not being intellectually lazy, actually taking the time to think about a situation, fire some neurons, burn some calories with your brain. But I think the important distinction to make is it's only a sacrifice if you lose something. It's like, let's say you're Bill Gates, right, and you give some guy $5. That might be compassionate, but that's not really sacrifice, because Bill Gates doesn't give a rat's ass. It doesn't affect him in any tangible way whatsoever. And then there's like sacrifice, like, let's say you always hear stories like in war, like they don't care about the cause. They're just soldiers fighting. They might not agree with the politics of why they're all there, but the reason that they're fighting is for each other. So if they sacrifice their life, they're not sacrificing it for the United States necessarily, or to defend the homeland, or to preserve freedom. They're sacrificing it to save somebody that they love, their brothers and sisters in arms, as they fight. So if the cause is completely unworthy, like it's just some BS unjust war, it's still sacrifice. It's just not for the reason that they're there. So I mean, things get like real messy and complicated with that, or they can.
I think it's interesting that you said, unjust. One thing I forgot to do, generally when we talk about virtues, I like to define what the virtue is in ultimate terms. And those of you out there should know that sacrifice is when courage meets love. So, you put these together and you get this, right? So
Orange.
You get your red and your yellow, you get your orange, and you mentioned that, it doesn't matter if it's a just cause. And you're right, because that would imply that this would be part of it, and honesty is not part of it. So, it's really interesting what you said, that a sacrifice, it doesn't matter if it's a just cause. And, the virtues would agree with that, is in the way that they're aligned. That also means that this really doesn't have anything to do with it either.
If I may offer,
Yes, please.
I think where it separates from compassion, and when you think about that, it is compassion and courage and valor brought together. It is not only that you're giving something, but by its nature, you have to be giving something up of yourself. Because if it's compassion is just the giving, sacrifice means you are not only giving that compassion, but taking it from yourself, essentially. So, exactly your point, Kevin, that there is some personal loss, and it is the very fact that you are very consciously giving up something of yourself that makes it so meaningful. And yes, to the point, it doesn't really speak to whether it's the rationality of the cause or the whether it's an honest cause or what have you. But that's kind of the key part, though. Obviously, one has to be careful, because when you're giving away from yourself, you are invariably limiting your ability to give in the future. If you give too much, it's like a bloodletting. Too much, and you're going to harm yourself, making you unable to give in the future. So you not only have to think about the moment, but the long-term repercussions of what you're giving up, and what the implications will be for the person you're giving to.
So sort of the greater good type thing. Like if you added up, the loss and everything, it's like, is your action actually creating more good than it's creating bad, I guess.
I mean, I think of it for myself, because one of the things one has to be careful about is, if you give everything away, then you can't even take care of your family or yourself, and that's not really good for anyone in the long run. So there needs to be a balance between, which I think is true for all these things. I think in general we recognize that these are all, I was going to say principles, but no. But this is a framework for which these are all constantly in balance, and it is how we balance it that determines our makeup. So that's kind of my take on it.
I like how we come back to balance. I think, balance is my feather. There you go. I think balance is very critical, but you hit on something that I was thinking we would get to many, many episodes from now. You mentioned how, it has to be kind of for the greater good, right? I think that is something that kind of because we're gonna talk about all the virtues, then we're gonna talk about all the principles, and then we're gonna talk about this, intangible little thing called infinity. What happens when you got all the virtues together, when you've got your Varamo core, right? And I really think that if you had to define some principle, such a loaded word in Ultima Mythos, a principle of infinity, it like for the whole to be greater than the sum of its parts, each of those parts must be contributing to something greater than itself. Again, it has to be in some kind of balance, but maybe we'll talk about that several weeks down the road. But it's interesting that you hit on that. That's something that I've been considering lately as I commute to and from work and spend a lot of time on the bus. John, do you have any thoughts? You've been quiet.
I was sacrificing my time because I tend to babble a lot. No, they both brought up really good points. Again, compassion is giving. Sacrifices, you have to have something coming out of yourself. But it could be money, it could be time, it could be, doing something that you don't necessarily want to do, but it's for the benefit of somebody else. And you weigh that against your own choices. I think Joseph hit a really good point. Again, the fact that you have to be cognizant of you have your own responsibilities too. Like you can't just give it all away. Yeah, you want to help everybody. Yeah, you want to do compassionate things for the world, but at the same time, you got to pay your bills and you got to take care of the people that you're responsible for. And sometimes I think people get into trouble wanting to do more good, but not really thinking about the long-term final cost of it. And the other thing too that I think just briefly Kevin had mentioned is sometimes you want to help somebody or you want to be sacrificial to someone. If you've done that to the person in the past and they've been unappreciative or taken advantage of that, maybe you got to take a look at that and go, I'm not going to keep, doing that to somebody who's not going to turn around and make the best possible use of that sacrifice. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, a lot of people make that criticism of certain charitable organizations. They say, is their work addressing the root cause of the problem, or is it simply causing it to go on forever? Like, is it enabling the status quo? Is it just like an endless, event horizon of resources being poured somewhere? And then I think it also partially ties in, like, what is the motivation, or what are the motivations behind people making sacrifices? Is it because it makes them, get butterflies in their stomach and feel good, and they can go home feeling all self-righteous, like they're a good person? Is it because it's their job, because they need the money? There can be a bunch of different reasons, and so do the reasons even matter? As long as it's done in a way that does increase the greater good.
I think.
I don't know.
So I had 2 points. One, I think is very interesting that sacrifice is the only virtue that has nothing to do with honesty, or truth, and that is, I think that really speaks to that it's almost agnostic in its nature. It is purely about the self and how you are making that conscious calculation, which is why. Kind of to follow up on your point, Kevin, what you said is so important. Is it really is about the authenticity of the act, and I did a little bit of work in this in my earlier academic life. When you talk about moral philosophy and how people come to define how they act, and how they make decisions, it is very interesting and very complex. And there are certainly examples of people who do things that one would normally think are sacrificial and very honor and very giving. And then, it's for selfish reasons or because they think they're required to or whatever. So I think it's when it comes down to those really authentic situations where someone is really doing something of no personal benefit purely for the helping someone else, even though they're losing something, where they are not going to gain anything back emotionally, physically, spiritually. It's almost an oxymoron in that it is a virtue that requires you to do it without expecting the positive experience of virtue. Yeah, I hope that made some sense.
So are you saying that, again, to put it in an ultimate sense, to legitimately gain an eighth in sacrifice, are you suggesting that it must be absolutely altruistic?
So I have a lot of trouble with that, and I've struggled with that probably like for 3 decades now. I have the same issue with humility. Is how can you be humble if you're aware you're being humble? Which I will get to later with the whole when I kind of talk about my events and the unseen order, is this problem I've grappled with since the first time I played Ultima. I guess it was 5 on an Apple II Plus, 30 years ago or what have you. Is again, with sacrifice, we know in the mechanics of the game, you're in Ultima 4, you're not really sacrificing. You're giving money, you're giving blood because you need to get your points up. And in life, we sometimes give to charity because it'll make us feel good. That's the kind of the common economic rationalization. But there are, I strongly believe, these authentic experiences where it is altruistic. I guess, though, to Joseph, to answer your question, I would consider those other forms of sacrifice still sacrifice. Maybe there's levels of purity of it. I'd have to think much more on that.
So, and also, just to be completely pedantic, I would argue that humility is also a virtue that has nothing to do with honesty, because technically that sits outside of truth, love, and courage.
But I thought it was that pride really sits outside, and humility is the opposite of pride.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I've always thought that was a not well-defined construct.
Because I thought that, so I've seen it illustrated 2 ways. I've seen the Venn diagram with humility floating over like a moon, and I've seen the codex symbol where humility is the outside. So I always thought that pride was everything, and humility was the opposite of it out here, which is why it was out there. But on the codex symbol, of course, it's this wonderful, all-encompassing thing. That's a great question.
I had always read it, and now I'll shut up for a bit, that pride was the absence of virtue and humility was the opposite of pride, which then makes me think, well, humility is like spirituality, but they're obviously very different. So I struggle with that one.
Lord British, could we get you over here for a second? That's an interesting question, and I'm sure this question has been debated and answered before. But yeah, that's a great question. You know, are you humble? Yeah, I'm way more fucking humble than you, right? It's like of course, it's one of those things that's it's hard to be. It's like the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle of humility and sacrifice, right? If you're sacrificing to get something in return. Oh, hello, puppy. Oh my God. Hold on a second. I just need to look at that dog for a second. Hi, dog. Oh, look at that dog.
He's a ball of love.
Wow. Alex is going to take him home. Oh, God. Okay, anyway. So, yeah, it's like, you know, and then, so obviously when you're playing Ultima, you know, if I go give blood, I'm going to go get points, right? And sacrifice, which the instant that you realize, see the numbers behind that is the instant that it, you know, in my opinion, no longer becomes fun. But I'm trying to think of a real example. You know, like a friend of yours is in trouble. They need money. You don't really have spare money, but you can spare it. It's going to mean you don't eat out, or you bike to work for a week, or, you know, you don't take an Uber, or you skip a concert. You know, you can spare it, but you really don't want to, you know, and you give your friend money. You know, I think that would qualify as sacrifice if your friend really needs it. But what if your friend just keeps doing that and everyone keeps giving them money and they never learn, right? Is there any obligation to have some prudence about your sacrifice? Would that be some honesty creeping in there? I mean, that's a weird thing. But so then you think about the greater whole, right? Are you doing more good by giving to this person than not? You know, suppose they learn a lesson, or they go out and get a job or something. I mean, I don't know, this is a really abstract example, but which can be debated morally from every direction. But it's like, is there any type of obligation to think about the greater good of what, you know, of the sacrifice that you're making? I mean, I think that's a question for everybody to ask every day before they give. A very concrete example. I was unemployed for over 2 years. I was on sabbatical. I drove around the country and soul searched and ran Ultima LARP events. But, you know, I also realized there are things that I can do for the Ultima community that I can do because I have all the time in the world when I'm unemployed, like try to run events and do stuff like that. Then I also realized, but there's other things that I can do for the Ultima community if I have money. So if I have a job, I can have trinkets made. I can contact artists like Dennis Lubay and musicians that made music in Ultima 6, and I can commission new pieces. I can do stuff that, you know, I didn't do it, but well, I guess I sort of helped because I backed Dennis on Patreon. But, you know, Dennis was able to use his Patreon money to do a new cover for Ultima 7, right? Everybody loved the cover for Ultima 7 that he made. And so, like, the question is, should I work the best job that I can and try to throw my money at the Ultima community, or should I be on sabbatical spending all of my waking hours? You know, which is better? Which is the sacrifice? Is one a sacrifice? I struggle with this question, right? You know, I struggle with this question. Am I a better partner to my fiance when I am happy and doing the things that I love but not making as much money and, you know, being super nice? Or am I a better partner when I'm going to work every day and the commute kind of annoys me, but I'm pulling in money to support her? I think we've been struggling with these questions ever since with the concept of supporting people through money was a thing, right? as soon as currency was invented.
Yeah, I potentially got something. I was talking about earlier about how it might be tied into whether or not it increases, like the net good, the greater, if it serves the greater good or not. But then, you were mentioning that it's not tied in with the principle of truth. So, and the virtues just being a framework. Then we have Blackthorn, where the virtues were, you have to do it, but it's completely flipped upside down, which was like horror show in the game. It made for a terrible society. So I actually think I might backtrack a bit on what I said. I think sacrifice is simply the act of giving something that cost you, something that you miss, period. But there's raw sacrifice, and then there's sacrifice as a virtue. Like the word virtue implies that it does serve some kind of good, if not the greater good. So if you're looking at sacrifice as something good that you should aspire to, the difference between a foolish or unworthy sacrifice and one that's truly good would be your ability to make a judgment call based on all of the other variables. So sacrifice could in fact still be sacrifice, but be bad. Like if I won the lottery and I gave $1 million, if I won $2 million in the lottery and I gave 99% of it to Al Qaeda, that's like a huge sacrifice because now I'm poor again. And I also just gave $1 million, to a bunch of fundamentalist, crazy terrorist head cutters. So yeah, it's still a sacrifice, but it sure as hell doesn't serve the greater good.
In that case, you may say you gained an eighth in sacrifice, lost an eighth in honor because you pledged not to be a terrorist as a citizen of the United States. That one, at least, I think, is a little clear cut. By the way, welcome, Hal Graff. How are you?
Oh, just dandy. Are we picking me up or no?
Oh, you're fine. We hear you.
Excellent.
So actually, since you're here, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself to everybody that may or may not know who you are out there in YouTube land?
Hellgraph Dragon. Honestly, not entirely sure what to say. I know a bunch of the other dragons. I attend that other gaming podcast occasionally. And
that other gaming podcast is fantastic, by the way. It's not a dirty word here. Are you talking about Kenneth's podcast?
The one with all the spam in it, yes.
Indeed. In fact, I just attended my first spam humbug podcast last week. It was my very first one, and it was fantastic. So those of you out there that's interested in Ultima and virtues and all kinds of fantastic geek nerdity related things, I should have been saying this for years. Totally check out Kenneth's podcast, but Kenneth has been doing a great job of touting that himself. But it's good to have you here, Hal Graff. By the way, I'm not asleep is a totally valid thing to say. I think that's a good start for all of us. So you jumped in right when we're talking about sacrifice. Do you have any thoughts on the virtue of sacrifice?
At the moment, I literally just jumped into things. I'm trying to shift my brain out of I just got out of work mode before I try to think about a heavy topic.
Excellent.
So at the moment, I'm more lurking.
No, that's totally fine. You're welcome. There's plenty of space. Those of you out there in YouTube land, if you want to jump in, we've got plenty of spots. Also, if you are afraid to jump in or you don't have the technology to do so, rusticdragon@gmail.com. Send me an email. I will read your thoughts about sacrifice on air. Yeah, so when Hellgraph joined us, we were talking about Kevin's example and how he's maybe changing his idea of how, kind of more toward the agnostic approach of sacrifice that Unseen mentioned. Sacrifice for sacrifice's sake. And, is there a need? Is there any need to try to temper sacrifice with, something that may or may not be important? The honor and honesty. Or is there any obligation to be a holistic avatar? Do you need to try to temper your sacrifice with something that may not be a part of it as a core virtue? Go for it, Hellgraph.
Okay. Ultimately, any one of the virtues can be taken to excess. This is, I believe, actually been touched upon in several of the prior virtue-based podcasts. So yes, if you're looking at avatarhood as the state, as the goal to align yourself towards, you have at some point to consider what is the greater picture? What is potentially being lost by dedicating myself to one path to the exclusion and sometimes the literal detriment of the others? So I believe the short answer is yes. One has to consider. I mean, sacrifice as a virtue, yes. Honor as a virtue, yes. Honesty as a virtue, yes. You have to look at the bigger picture sometimes. You have to dial it back and look at how the tree fits in the forest.
Yeah, another example potentially. Tell me if I'm way off base. Like when the United States dropped 2 nuclear bombs on civilians in World War II. I don't know. I'm not sure if that falls into the realm of sacrifice, but the idea was that they were, in the end, actually saving more lives overall by basically sacrificing those civilians. So it's like a terrible, terrible, unfathomably horrific thing that you don't even want to think about, much less being anywhere close to when it happens to truly witness the horror. And yet, in the end, was that good? Was that a good thing to kill that many civilians in such a horrific way?
That is a different type of sacrifice.
Yeah, that's like a sacrifice in chess.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know these people. I'm just a murderer. I mean, to take it out of perspective, you say sacrificing these people. I say murdering these people.
Yes, sure.
They don't mean anything to me.
They might. Like the idea that I am a citizen of a country and I'm forced as a citizen to, in part, take responsibility for my own nation's history, even though I didn't push the button and I wasn't alive then, to vote for our leaders or whatever. But the people who were alive at the time, I mean, they have to live with that. That many murders, they have to live with that. So in a way, that is a sacrifice. I'm sure. The people in the government that came to that conclusion and executed it. How could they sleep at night after that? And maybe they slept like a baby. I don't know, but I could not live with having to make a decision like that. It would destroy me. So in that respect, you're right. I see what you're saying, but in that respect, it was to a degree a sacrifice. I would hope, as well, for the people that made the decision. That could be obvious.
Potentially say if you want to use these terms, they sacrifice part of their soul to make that decision. Now, I'm going to take this tangent, and I'm sorry for taking this tangent, but you talked about this, and this is something that that's kind of interesting to me. If you have never been, go to Japan and go to 2 places. You want to go to Yasukuni Shrine and the Hiroshima Peace Museum. They are 2 very different places. Of course, if you go to the Yasukuni Shrine, you may spark an international incident. Oh my God, Justin Bieber went to the Yasukuni Shrine and he didn't know what it meant. Jesus fucking Christ. Go there and learn something, right? Pull your head out of your ass. It's not symbolic for a foreign person to go to Yasukuni Shrine. Yes, it is symbolic for the Prime Minister of Japan to go to Yasukuni Shrine and pray before military action. It's symbolic. But Justin motherfucking Bieber going there, Jesus Christ. Anyway, rant. The point is, both of them have museums to the bomb. Hiroshima has a building that is preserved in its destroyed state. The building's continuing to fall apart, but they are actually reinforcing it to stay in the exact condition it was at the time of the bomb. It's a kind of interesting problem to have, to keep something in to rebuild something that's falling apart. But that is very off topic. But if you go to Yasukuni Shrine, you will be told this about what happened in World War II. And if you go to the Hiroshima Peace Museum, you will be told something completely different. And if you read an American history book, you will be told something completely different. Everybody should read history books from other countries. But the interesting thing is about, with World War II specifically, the Hiroshima Peace Museum says, this was a terrible thing. This should never happen again, no matter what it takes. We will say it's our fault. We don't care. It's not about pride. It's about making sure this never happens again. This should never have happened. We could have stood down. We could have, there you go. Yasukuni Shrine, on the other hand, says it's absolutely not our fault. We tried to stand down. Meetings were ignored. We have evidence that the United States wanted to collect, results of experiments. The cameras were sent down ahead of time, and this is true. Cameras were sent down ahead of time. They the effects of what happened. They wanted to study what would happen if bombs were dropped on cities. And there is a very reasonable body of evidence that says that the United States did not have to drop 2 bombs. So there's a body of evidence out there that says that the United States didn't have to drop 2. They certainly didn't have to drop 2, but they may not have even had to drop 1. And Yasukuni Shrine will claim that Japan tried multiple times to come to the table and talk, and they will blame the United States almost entirely for it. And this is within the same country. And so I just really want to throw that out there. Especially when we have Cheeto in chief as our current sitting president, I hate to think that the threat of nuclear war is again on our plate, but this is something that's goddamn fucking terrifying, and I encourage people to educate themselves on this as much as possible. And I apologize for taking this tangent to do that, but this is a horrifying, terrible, important thing to think about, and to think about, and what you just said, right? If you look at the American textbook, there's one paragraph. The bombs were dropped in order to end World War II faster. It was a merciful thing to try to end. There may have been less killing. That's what the American textbook says. And is that true? Did it save more lives? I honestly, I'm not qualified to say that, but 2 atomic bombs leveled cities, and there's a paragraph in a textbook that says this was a mercy thing. This was a good thing to do. And it's written off as some type of benevolent sacrifice. As Helgraf said, every virtue can be taken to the extreme. I would argue on one hand that this really isn't a good example of an Ultima style sacrifice, but I would also say that if it was, it is one that is taken in a way that's very perverted. And
it's what Blackthorn would have approved of, basically.
Yeah, and it's terrifying. It's absolutely important to think about these things when you have people that are so far removed from reality. And I'm not trying to say that you're a bad person for saying it this way in any way. I'm not trying to imply that. But what I am saying is when you can come to the conclusion that dropping an atomic bomb on an entire city of civilians is some type of noble sacrifice, I think we need to take a step back and think about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't mean it quite like that. I think I tried to express sort of how I meant it. It's like you have to assume that humans have basic human decency, especially our leaders. So the fact that they did something like that, I don't know. You can either say, well, in the end, that was for the greater good, or these people are fucking evil. And it's difficult for me to believe that they were evil, that it was easy for them. I don't know.
I want to jump in on a comment, and I hate to bring politics in, and I don't want to belabor the point.
I opened the can of worms.
Yeah.
So
here's my viewpoint, because I actually just had a long dissertation with somebody the other day regarding the Confederate monuments down here in the South and the Civil War and going back through history and things. And I mean, there's 2 sides to everything. There's so much that's whitewashed on many, many levels throughout history. And one of the things, and I'm going to go back to World War II especially, is, to your point, American textbooks tend to glorify and, we went in to kick the Nazis' ass and to do this and to do that. It's not really what happened. That's not really what history partake. We didn't want to be in World War II. We didn't actually want to step foot in it whatsoever. It was only because Japan attacked us and only because Germany at that point turned around and had to declare war as their allies were we in fact forced into the conflict. And I'll go back to a point here recently that was brought up in modern day with the immigration stuff. We rounded up quite a number of U.S. citizens that were of Japanese, German, and Italian descent. We rounded up any immigrants that were here in our country. We locked them in camps. We left them there for many years, and we took their land, we took their money, we took their citizenship and their rights, and we threw them in there and said, screw you guys, we don't care, we're scared of you, and you, by God, you're fighting for our enemies, even though these were people that had lived all their lives within our country. And at the time, to be fair to Kevin's point, yeah, I'm sure some people thought that was a good idea, and they had the most noble intentions. Intentions are paved to the road to hell, as they would say. And, many years later, our government was forced to apologize and pay reparations and acknowledge the very dark stain that was upon our history. We've done that. I mean, and it's not just the United States. I mean, you can go back through centuries and millennia. Human beings are capable of the most terrible, horrible things in nature. And there's really no way to say that a person is necessarily good or altruistic or anything. I mean, it's history judges that, and the actions judge that. So like I said, I really, as a topic for political discussion, it's, to me, is a little disgusting to bring the ultimate virtues into it, because frankly, I don't think any of our leaders currently are in that mindset whatsoever. I really desperately wish that they were, but I don't feel that that's what's going on in this day and age right now.
We have reached the bottom of the barrel. I mean, how can it get worse from here, really?
Well, fingers crossed that it doesn't. That's my biggest concern. Going back to the original point of the sacrifices in terms of the ultimate stuff, I do not think that honesty needs to be necessarily a point to it. I think the two primary principles, love and courage. Love being, even if it's something that may harm the person, do you do it because you love this person, because you just don't want to see them suffer, whatever it is that they're going through, that they need the help? Courage in the fact of, can you give up whatever it is that you're going to give up that may harm you but will benefit that person? Or do you have to sometimes go, no, you know what, I can't do it without putting myself at risk? That goes back to the virtue questions that the gypsy pulls out the cards. I mean, yes, you can be sacrificial, but you always have to give up something else. You always have to have that other balance of, you're doing this, but there will be a cost elsewhere. Like, you may end up being unjust. You may end up being unhonorable. You may be, prideful in doing it, whatever it may be. So,
I just had this wonderful, 2 or 3 panel comic pop into my head. Avatar is walking into town. He walks into a healer. The healer says, "Would you like to give blood? It'll cost 1/3 of your hit points." And the Avatar says, "Nope. I'm not going to give you any of my blood. I'm going to sacrifice the 1/8 that I haven't sacrificed for that blood because I want it." And then troll face. I could see that. But I want to take a moment to say welcome to Hobbit, if Hobbit is there and can hear me. Also, we've got a couple emails. Hobbit, did you want to say hi? Well, I can't hear him. I saw that he unmuted, but we can't hear him. Oh, we got a click.
Click? Well, that's probably my sound then. Oh, you can? Okay. All right, good evening.
Hobbit, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm known as Hobbit Dragon. I've been in Utic since mid-90s, 95, 96, something like that. Played through all of the Ultima, started with Ultima 4 and 85, been to 2nd and 3rd Hobloth, been to 1st and 2nd Feast of the Silver Serpent, beta tested Soda, and still playing Soda off and on as it is.
How can you beta test something that's pre-alpha?
Well, right. Well, that's what we're, all doing.
Early access.
I'm just kidding. Well, welcome.
Technicalities.
Hobbit, is this your first time in a Dragonsmeet?
It is my first time. I kept missing them, and it's like, okay, I see it. I'm on. Let me see if I can get into this thing. So I just don't have a camera.
That's okay. Well, welcome, and I'm loving the baby face in your profile picture. That's something.
Yeah, it's a little while ago.
Well, welcome. We are very happy to have you here. As I mentioned, we have 2 emails that have come in. I'd like to read those since they took the time of writing them and all. All right. email from Golden Flame saying, hi, he is heading to the East Coast in the morning and he's going to be joining us in the festival next week, which is fantastic. But he said, he's just tuning in and occasionally shouting things at the screen. So yay for shouting things at the screen. Hello, Golden Flame. Thank you for tuning in. Amber Rain up in Canada, up in Abbotsford, the murder capital of Canada, apparently. I just love to say that, the murder capital of Canada. It's like saying, like, I mean, I don't even know what else you would say. It's like the hug capital of a death pit or something. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. But she writes that she's unable to be in the hangout, which she's very sad about, but she has some things to say. She says that the laws of virtues as seen by Blackthorn was not a bad thing. In fact, it is how she dedicates her life to the virtues now, uphold the virtues as a law. With that said, sacrifice, give all of yourself. She said she was just having a discussion about this with Golden Wing the other day, and they were having quite a debate about it, and they just couldn't agree. He said that if you were not making money and giving all of it to society, if you were not making money and giving all of that, then society would not think that you were a good partner and were meaningless. Amber Rain cannot agree with this. She believes that if you're not helping out society by doing something, not making money, but physically, mentally, or emotionally doing something is better for the society, and it is a sacrifice. She says, I will personally not look at what I do as sacrifice, but I help the homeless with food, shelter, and helping them pick themselves up and try to get on the path toward a better, safer future. I call this being a kind, warm-hearted person. I give what I can of what I have and as much of what I have as possible, oftentimes leaving me without because someone else needed it. Someone else needed it. Someone else needed it more. That's an important question to ask yourself. I think about that balance thing. She asks, how can this be a bad thing? I do not see it as a sacrifice, but the meaning of it is really sacrifice. It is just being kind and helping someone less fortunate than yourself out. It is a good thing. Sacrifice as a law by Blackthorn was a good thing. Give of yourself completely. He said give half. I say give even more if you can. As for another meaning of sacrifice, well, I'm not into blood magic, so I have to say nothing about the altar and sacrificing someone for the better good of man, although I do agree that certain people should be removed from the planet and eaten for dinner, but I don't believe in going all Hunger Games sacrifice is necessary. Thank you, Amber Rain, for that. Fantastic to get another perspective there. I appreciate that. Kevin, she had directed some of that at you. Do you want to respond to any of that?
Sure. Like, we have to have laws because people don't do the right thing. If everybody did the right thing, we wouldn't need government, we wouldn't need laws. We just have to use common sense and everybody would have a little bit of everything. We get along just fine. Like almost like the idea of communism or whatever. But practically speaking, there's so many people that don't do the right thing that to a degree we do have to have laws that, because everybody's not nice. Everybody doesn't do the right thing. So I do like the idea that you should give all of yourself, but that only works if everyone else does the same thing. Otherwise, you're going to get, predated upon, if that's proper English or whatever, I have no idea. And you'll have nothing. And then you'll have to fall into some sort of social safety net that's set up by government. So you'll be freaking homeless and starving to death with your ass kicked pretty much most of the time. So it's like a great theory. It's almost like the teachings of Jesus in a way or whatever, like Sermon on the Mount like type stuff, which is awesome, but it only works if everyone does it. So I like it, but I'm not sure that it's practical in our world as it's ever been, including up to right now.
Right. It'd be fantastic if communism worked, but communism doesn't work because inevitably someone's going to be a greedy dick and take advantage of it. In an ideal world, if everybody gave half, then there would be plenty for all. So, but yeah, that's just, unfortunately, that's just not.
However, by the same token, does that mean you shouldn't bother just because some exploitive bastard is inevitably going to take advantage? Should you just, if you're just saying this doesn't work unless everyone does it, then nobody is sacrificing, nobody's doing these things for the greater good, and then you're even worse off. You have even less of that. You have even less of a concept of a safety net, which doesn't have to be government defined, by the way. Getting into politics from a side angle, because I recognize that religion ultimately has a political angle. Various faith groups have been doing support networks for people for centuries. Is there entanglement? Yes, there's always issues because we're all ultimately humans and flawed.
Yeah,
but does that mean you just stop and give up because someone else is going to screw you eventually?
So to put that to answer that specifically in our example of communism doesn't work example, we were taking Amber Rain's extreme example of the black thorns. Everybody must give half. So so to answer your question, absolutely everyone should not give half because there's assholes out there that's not going to work. But I don't believe that everyone should not give anything. Which kind of leads us back to then what criteria do we use to determine how much we give and when we give, to whom we give, and all that. Kevin and Hobbit, I think you both had something to say. Hobbit, would you like to go first since you're new?
Sure. Just compare to the concept that if there were no evil, how would we recognize good? If there were no greed, how would we recognize sacrifice of material things and donations? So that's kind of what makes it special, is that only a few people choose to do it, and how much usually comes down to a personal level of what they can live without.
Yeah, in a perfect world, it wouldn't need to be recognized because the dark side wouldn't exist. So good wouldn't be special. It would be our default state of behavior, but we're so far from that. But so yeah, no, that's perfectly true, and that should compel people. Seeing the darkness should compel people towards the light. Hopefully, at some point, we'll evolve, biologically or socially, to where we're no longer, compelled by culture or compelled by scarcity of resources to screw other people over, so we can level up or whatever. And have enough food and a big enough house and et cetera, all the reasons people backstab and shock each other and act unvirtuously. But I think the virtues and pursuing the virtues are useless without first being able to make an informed judgment as to whether or not your actions in pursuit of virtue are indeed virtuous. For example, when I was buying a 12-pack of beer that I'm drinking out earlier tonight at a gas station. There was a lady in front of me, and she was going on, I'm going to put $3 on the card and this and that. There was all this confusion, like she didn't have enough money. And I was impatient in line, so it was partly to help myself, but it was partly because I do like helping people out that don't have a lot of money, because I intimately know what it's like to not have a lot of money. And so I was just going to go, help her and put the rest, what she couldn't afford, on my card. And she said, I'll be right back, to the shopkeeper, and walked out of the gas station. And then I saw that she was trying to buy a 12-pack of beer. And I'm like, well, damn it. I was just about to, help her out and give her some money because she didn't have enough money, but she's just buying beer, and I'm buying beer. So I wasn't judging her because I'm buying beer too, but I was like, well, damn, she doesn't need this. And so I decided not to do it. And that was the best informed judgment I could make at the time, trying to be compassionate and also, make a sacrifice of me losing a little bit of what little money I had.
Just for the sake of argument, you said you know what it's like to be not able to afford things. Be careful with that judgment, because sometimes that 12-pack of beer, they really fucking need that beer at that time. You say they don't need the beer. Okay.
Oh, I know.
Sometimes, there have been times, in the depth of depression and the depth of scraping money, of grabbing quarters out from under the, looking under vending machines to get, all you want is that cheeseburger. It's not healthy. It's better to buy a loaf of bread. It's not, but that cheeseburger is going to make you happy. It's going to make you feel human. Yes, we can talk all day about alcoholism is, alcohol's an escape and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Hobbit is going to give a talk on beer at the Festival of the Silver Serpent, right? Beer doesn't always mean escapism. Sometimes, you can enjoy beer just for the sake of argument. And I'm not saying you were wrong, and I'm not saying that this is right, but were I in that situation, I actually probably would have erred more to, hey, you know what? You want some beer? You know what? You're on some hard times. Put this shit back. I'm going to get you some beer. Put this Miller High Life back. If you're having so much trouble getting beer, here, have this. Get some Guinness. Get some fancy microbrew. Have some real goddamn beer.
She was trying to buy Heineken, so good for her. She wasn't going for the low grade piss water that I drink. But in my defense, I had about 5 seconds to decide, so I did the best I could.
Well, everything's obviously easy in hindsight, and when we're debating it as a virtue thing, but and who knows, right? Maybe you saved a life. Maybe the beer was for someone else. Maybe the beer, who knows? And that's the thing that makes it difficult, is that we have no way of knowing. But I think it is important to try to consider as many angles as we can until it paralyzes us from doing anything from overinformation. But I did like something that you mentioned. You said doing things that are virtuous in pursuit of your virtues. Meaning, does that mean that the ends do not justify the means to you?
Well, the ends can justify the means or not. It depends on the context and the gravity of the situation. It's like with the World War II example of nuking civilians.
Okay. How many strangers then? How many strangers would you kill for world peace? How many is it okay? At what point is it okay? Is it okay to kill one person for world peace?
It depends on whether or not you're Vulcan.
Does it become not okay?
Oh, God.
Spock would say just under 50% or something. I don't know. I wouldn't kill anyone unless they literally were about to kill me, or a family member, and I knew that it wasn't just me saying, well, they're probably going to do it. Like, if they're acting crazy as hell and they have a gun at my wife's head, they're going to die. And I probably won't lose too much sleep over it, in theory.
I ask you that question because, firstly, I like moral questions, but my friend asks me this question. My friend CR first asked me that. We were having a political discussion one day, and he asked that, and I was like, "That's a damn good question. How many people in another country that you have no idea who they are? Iraqi children, whatever. How many Iraqi children would you sacrifice for world peace?"
If I were in control, it would be exactly 0. I wouldn't do it. I would find a different way, unless. As much as I could control, as the executor of action and some position of responsibility and charge of such things, my goal, collateral damage would not be acceptable, not a single life. And I know, again, that's extremely impractical. But for me personally, if there's not a better way, then we're animals that don't deserve to live. It's not as we imagine ourselves to be some higher form of life with dignity and morality and all the things that separate us from the beasts. I would push until my last breath for a better way. Again, very impractical. That's what I would do, because anything less, I wouldn't feel comfortable.
So apparently,
myself.
Economists ruin everything. Apparently, economists have an answer to this question.
Well, this is kind of the classic philosophy 101 deontological versus utilitarianism argument in terms of, do you do the maximum good for the maximum number of people, which of course is a computation no one can do, or are there certain rules that are hard, fast, and you simply do not break them for any reason whatsoever? Right. And there's all sorts of again, like moral philosophy structures that show that we are not very good at playing these games, and we're certainly not designed to. The most simple and classic being, if a train's coming down the track and you're at a switch, it's a very constructed discussion. But if you're at a switch and there are two people lying on the track and you can throw the switch and the train will run over only one person, do you throw the switch? Now, and if someone's going to be completely analytical, they would say, of course I would, because now only one person dies instead of two. But it turns out most people won't do that.
So
not that you actually test this in real life, but
no, I mean let's test it. You've got Legos and trains, right? No, I'm totally kidding. It is 9 o'clock, so actually we need to let you talk more, guys. This was fantastic. This is probably the most philosophical we've gotten at a Hearth of Britannia Dragonsmeet. I would love to do this again. Those of you out there who are watching, if you have thoughts on this, please email rusticdragon@gmail.com. I would love to read them at the next Dragonsmeet. And I will, as a closing thought, give the answer that the economists gave to this question, which is as many as it takes. Economists are heartless bastards. Game theory. Ugh. Anyway, so moving right along, man, I've totally stolen that from Lunch with Laz and Jack, New Britannia News Network. Moving right along, any little cow sound effect. We do have Unseen Dragon here, the proprietor. Do you have a title, like, of the proprietor of the Unseen Order, like the head, the lead, the guru?
I guess that was never really defined. I need to come up with that, and I'll get into that actually a little bit, and it will actually relate to the discussion we just had. So this will come full circle.
All right, so the Ubermensch of the Unseen Order. We have Unseen Dragon Joseph Drayson is here with us tonight to talk about the Unseen Order. From its humble beginnings, just about to run your third. I mean, is it safe to call this an Ultima event?
I think I'd call it Ultima inspired or something like that.
Excellent. So just about to run the third event after two very, very successful events that have, similar to the Hearth of Britannia events, seem to kind of grow in orders of magnitude each time, like trying to do all the things each time that you wanted to do the last time. But we've got all kinds of questions to ask if you are not prepared to talk yourself. But if you've got something that you want to say first, by all means. Otherwise, I have questions.
I'll just say a couple things, and then I'm happy to take questions. I've been thinking quite a bit about, like, when I was the origins of the first festival, which was it's easy to remember because it was the hottest June in history of Maryland.
The Festival of the Sweaty Serpent.
Pretty much, and kind of how it got started, and I will weave in the ideas of the Unseen Order, which come from my name, obviously, but they're very closely related. It's not just obviously me just stealing it. And those who are coming to this year's event obviously got the invitation, which tells a lot of the story. Each of the events actually has a very detailed script and story that goes behind it that for many of the attendees, they are aware of that to varying degrees. So I'll just give a little bit of, and that's by design. The events I host are, as much as I can, supposed to be experienced in a way different for each person. And so that means everyone takes something very different out of them. But at the end of the day, hopefully it is a fun, relaxing, and overall very silly event. And so I should go back and just say where the Unseen Order comes from, because I wanted to talk about that related to the conversation we had. So when I was very, very young, playing Ultima 5, I was very drawn to this idea of virtues, but I was confounded by this idea that if you are being virtuous for the sake of virtue, that is by definition unvirtuous. It's not humble. So this got, because I'm probably 14, 15 at the time, and I take things to the extreme, I said, by definition, the only true virtuous act would be one that no one knows about, or that no one knows you are the source of. So therefore, you could never gain any kind of adoration for it. In fact, the avatar could never be known who he was, because his actions would be so wonderful, but at the same time, completely unseen by anyone.
So the antithesis of modern marketing and social media.
Correct. It was by definition. In fact, if you did something nice and someone recognized it, that was actually immoral. Again, very young. I took things a bit to the extreme, but that's actually the origin of my name. This idea of the unseen avatar, that this person who would do good, but never seek recognition, or in fact would shy away from such things. And this extended.
Sorry. Wearing an invisibility ring.
It never had, and it was never, and I would, because I used this character as when I played WoW, when I played Ultima, and of course people would make those jokes. I can't see you, but of course there's nothing to do with actual visual sight. It is metaphoric. So that came, and then I started thinking, of this order of people who are doing good but having to stay in the background because they are, to our discussion, trying to keep balance in the universe. And to do that, they can't be seen because they can't be seen as manipulating or interfering with the universe. So they take action, but so it's kind of this group shrouded in mystery, because they're, I don't want to say puppet masters, but like they're kind of behind the scenes. So like certainly in Serpent's Isle, the Hierophant of Balance I drew a lot of inspiration from that, as this idea of this order of people throughout history have been trying to keep balance between the virtues. So that is some backstory. And again, those who got the invitation this year, there's a little bit about that in the story told there. So Joseph, you said you had a question, so I want to crown, but I'll happily answer your question, and I have some thoughts I have written down as well.
Sure. Well, thank you. Firstly, that's fantastic. Getting some insight into that is great. It kind of reminds me of some. I guess technically there's probably a name for the trope. The Adjustment Bureau, the Psijic Order in Skyrim. These cool, mysterious organizations that always do things behind the scenes, which is always fun. The part for me is I wonder, I'm like, how do you reconcile that? It's like sometimes it's almost like the nonprofit side of the company and the for-profit side of the company, and it's like, I always imagine that like the Unseen Order would have to have a Seen Order branch. We're back here, but we do need this public-facing company, to launder the money. We need that laundry mat on the first floor, like in Archer. And also, by the way, fantastic invitations. Do you mind if we share those on air?
Oh, go ahead, please do.
Okay. I'll go grab some as soon as I ask a question. I just have a whole slew of questions. They're not really in any particular order. I kind of rattled them off on Facebook the other day, so I'll just kind of pick one at random. The first couple questions are all kind of together. Like, what inspired you to do this? What are your goals from the event? When I first ran an event, I can't say that I had a goal. I mean, I did. The goal was for everyone to have fun, but it wasn't until I started running like Hobloth 2 and especially 3. Like 3 was an experiment, right? Do you have any goals when you run these events? And if so, what are they? And as you answer that, I'm going to run and grab the invitation.
Okay, and I will. So the first one I ran, so this is the festival, the first festival of the Silver Serpent. That's how I'm now referring to them. I came up with a liturgic, I can't even say the word, thing where I would change the F every time, but that got. So we've just come back to the festival of the Silver Serpent. The first one really came out of two things. I went to the first Hoploth in Indianapolis, and I had a really good time. And that was, first of all, the first time I ever wore garb. Very simple garb, but it was my first time, and I quite enjoyed it. And so this started to combine with the fact that I love dinner parties. I love hosting dinner parties. I cook a lot. I love everything about food. I love the history of food. I love the science of food. I love the placement of food. I love the design of food. I love everything about food. I like eating it too. Like literally, it's my favorite thing. And if you've seen me, that's somewhat obvious. So I love holding dinner parties, and when Rustic had his event, I was like, this is a really fun idea, doing a dinner party, which I've done that, but actually having a theme around it. So that's really fun. And then I went to the second Hobloth, the first one in Austin. That gave me, and I'm trying to keep my timelines together. That gave me, again, I mean, I'd never done any LARPing or anything like that. But it gave me a lot of thoughts about what's possible. And so I said, I want to do this dinner party. I want to have about, I don't know, I think 10 people over. And I want to just do a really cool themed multi-hour meal, a real medieval feast. And the first one was actually, it's the Festival of the Silver Serpent, but it was, the feast. So that was the first F. And so literally my goal and my thinking behind the first one is I want these close friends. I want us all to be at a table for 3 or 4 hours, eating, drinking, multiple intermissions with music and storytelling. Researching these old banquets that would go for days. So that was where it came. Now, one fly went in the ointment is that when I put out the invite, hey, who would like to come to Maryland for this cool event that I have no idea really what it's going to be, but it's going to be fun. I got like 25 RSVPs like really quickly. And I said, well, that's going to change the dynamic of my event because when you're cooking for 10, it's a very different mechanic. There's like certain numbers of people when you're cooking that the dynamics drastically change in terms of how you prepare your food, what you can serve, how you have to order it, sequence it. And 10 is a very different dynamic than 25.
Yeah, basically, it becomes more than a single oven of what will fit in one oven. The entire dynamic changes.
And the number of dishes that you have to have heated at different rates. Anyway, it gets really complicated, which is actually one of the things I really like about dinner parties is trying to figure out, it's like a giant puzzle. How do I, deliver 12 courses in a way? So, but that was also a lot of fun because, so my goal in the first one was to have everyone at a table eating. But for those who were there, obviously it expanded quickly beyond that because I went to Hobloth and I said, hey, I could have quests. Now I don't have a huge property like Richard, but I have a nice piece of land. And I can do some silly quests there and I can do some fun virtue things. And I really wanted the quests, again, going back to trying to make a focus of my event is being something to everyone in a very personal way. And so I had quests that were, Hobbit was for the love quest. It essentially had people writing in the book of love, which I have right behind me. What does love mean to them? And the quest of truth was a bunch of different puzzles. The quest of courage was a boffer tournament, and I had all these different things. And my intent was, kind of going back to what we all love about really good role playing games is no one person could solve all those quests. It's going to take a different person to win each. To be victorious in each quest. And so that's really what it was. I kind of went into it not knowing really what the hell to do. I stole and pestered Rustic a million times for, hey, how do I handle this situation? Or what am I doing about this? And the wonderful thing is I compare it to my wedding, and I'm trying to remind myself of this right now because I'm a week away from doing my biggest event yet. You're going to forget 100 things and no one's going to notice any of them. They're just going to know all the fun things that happened. And that really was, each of the events have had something really, really special about them that I've really loved. But that one being the first, there was a lot of personal pleasure. For those who know me, I have a relatively corporate life. I'm in my work. I don't cut loose, so to speak. So to have this outlet for my creativity, I've really enjoyed it, and I've really, I've gotten to push different parts of my brain, developing quests. I do crafting now. I can't show you the map, but I learned how to burn parchments to make authentic looking things. Like this is shit I never thought of. And I guess I should say that the joke I told at the first one, and this is true for all, one of the goals of all my events is to make all my friends come to me and me not have to get off my ass. So that's kind of a big part of it. What inspires me is seeing my friends. It's, I guess, selfish in some ways that I get to experiment with all this stuff, because, like, for those who don't know, there's a castle in my backyard right now that I'm constructing for the current event, which is quite silly, but awesome. I think I was thinking one of the most amazing things that came out of the first event. My neighbor, who I've known I've been here, I think, 5 years now. I'd known he's a couple years younger than I. He and his wife, and I'd known him pretty well. But he had asked, "Hey, I don't know if you know this about me, but I've been studying blacksmithing. Do you think?" And I was telling him about the event. Do you think people would be interested in that? I was like, "Are you shitting me? Do you know these people?" Of course, that's like the most amazing thing in the world. And he's like, "Would it be okay if I came and like set up my little forge and did some blacksmithing demos?" And I was like, "Yeah, people will love that." So anyway, my neighbor and his wife, Colin and Kate, came over probably about 9 o'clock. And for those who didn't know, there was a whole Guardian story around the first festival. The Guardian, had corrupted the virtues. They had been defeated, so we're trying to rededicate them. And at the end of all my events at midnight on the Apex night, well, now it's been 2 nights at last event, but the first night, it was just the second night, there is a march to the shrine, and I have a path through a river by my house that we marched to the shrine. And Kate had gone to bed, and Colin came with us because he's a fun dude, and not that she's not fun. And he ended up staying over till about 5 a.m. Because that's how late everyone was up, shooting the shit and playing games. And Kate shows up just in my house, didn't even knock, and going, "You were supposed to be home at midnight." And ever since then, and what the great postscript about it is because Kate, who actually has a master's in English, had gone and read all about Ultima, and the only thing she remembered from Ultima 7, which is the era according to the webpage, was a blacksmith gets sacrificed. And like, there was a little bit of her was wondering, is my husband going to come back from this? But ever since then, we have been, like, he and I have been incredibly close friends. Just from that experience, the second festival, he is the reason the second festival, the focus of the first festival was about the feast. The second was about crafting. He's a lot of why that is, and he has been the one pushing to help with the second one, and he's been heavily involved with the third one, which I can't reveal the F for this one because it's part of to be discovered, and we have to make sure it's all going to still work. But
so there is an F. I thought perhaps that you had experimented with a different F for the second one and decided, no, I'm not going to do that. There's so many great F words, though.
Yeah, so it has become an unofficial thing. So the official script when I started writing it was the Forces of the Silver Serpent. And as you know, those who have read the story, which I'll hand over to Joseph so he can show you. I mean, it's quite obvious that there's a fortress with something you have to rescue. So there's a big battle involved. That's on the webpage. So yes, this was about raising an army. So, each time I experiment with something different. This one, it's about having a dynamic battle, which I have no idea if it's actually going to work. But it's going to be silly no matter what, and everyone will have fun.
I think it's going to be fantastic. I'm waiting for the Fortran of the Silver Serpent myself. Let's talk about invitations real quick. I went and grabbed these. I'm going to set my camera to autofocus here. So you get your cool envelope, and I will cover your address up. I don't give a shit if people see mine. So first you get this cool envelope, and what's great about this is the return address, which is under my bowling fingers here, is you've got the cool unseen, the logo. Okay, I need to see the screen. There we go. There's the cool logo of the Unseen Order there. But what's cool is that's addressed to me, and that is my Shroud of the Avatar coat of arms on there. So you get this awesome personalized piece of mail, not only with the cool unseen order on it, but it's personalized to you. So right out of the box, it's right out of the mailbox. It's really cool. And inside, you've got several really cool things. The first thing that I noticed, because these are the things that I get excited about, I see parchment and I see a wax. And so again, looking at this wax seal, it is an unseen order wax seal. We've got a custom wax seal here on the invitation. And you open it up, and
I have to say, I have to thank Dame Lori for that.
oh, excellent. Well, thanks to Dame Lori. Dame Lori, this has made me happy as well. So thank you on behalf of the Hearth and me for making that for the unseen order. So you get some wonderful backstory here, which I'm not going to share because you're not going, unless you're going. And if you're going, you already know what it says. But we've got these symbols here, the Festival of the Silver Serpent coins. That was a collaboration, I believe, with Sir Frank Baxley.
Frank provided coins at the first two events. Yes.
So this is really near and dear to my heart. There's also 2 supplemental bits of information in there, more lore and some just some general information about the event and the schedule. But the reason that this is very near and dear to my heart, those of you out there that know the code of conduct of the Hearth of Britannia, give credit where it's due. So I love seeing that the Frank stuff and the Lori stuff and all that stuff is reused and called out. And speaking, of giving credit, the coolest thing in the invitation is this. What is this? Oh my God. It really is what you think it is. It is an entire comic book written and illustrated. Actually, I think it's written. Do you have writing credit on this? Yeah. Written by Unseen, illustrated by none other than Indy Martin. So Indy made this, and this book chronicles what happened at the first 2 events. And there's familiar faces in here. We can see Hobbit. I believe this is Hobbit right there. We've got Beard Commander, who of course is not with us tonight. I think we got Golden Flame here. We've got Unseen. We've got the Guardian, and it chronicles all of the adventures that happened at the first 2 to give you requisite backstory for the 3rd event. Is that me? Is that my bearded, feather-headed profile there, possibly? And this thing's just fantastic. I had the biggest, dumbest, most wonderful grin. And look, we just looked at this. Look, I mean, it's right there. It's in the comic book, right? Like, look, it's right there. And so this was the coolest thing I think I've ever gotten in the mail in my life. The most unexpected thing. Alex read it and she thought it was fantastic. There's Fergus and Mrs. Fergus. Sorry, Kate. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just kind of wanted to say Mrs. Fergus. I almost said Mrs. Six Fist, but more on that later. But this thing is just fantastic, and of course a couple advertisements. This was printed through Ben Pritchard. Relics by Rild, for those of you that don't know. And of course, we love Recap and the Space Bards, and they have an advertisement in here. And there's the tortoise and hare and that beautiful Unseen Order logo. And of course, all made possible in many ways, kind of, by Shroud of the Avatar and Lord British and Portalarium and Ultima. But this invitation was fantastic. It came with a comic book. And if you'd been to the other events, you were in the comic book. What better way to try to get people to go to your event than appealing to their vanity, right? I'm going to sit on my ass and make everybody come to my event. Well, you certainly put in enough work to make people do that, and flattery will probably get you everywhere. So this is fantastic.
Just to give some story on, I'm echoing. There I'm going. Okay, now on that. So there's actually a couple things which I was really excited that David Peters noticed. That picture at the banquet of him, like belly full. That picture was that, and the picture of Frank shooting his arrow. When these events are done, there's all these pictures. Those 2 pictures were really a lot of the inspiration for the comic. I don't know exactly why, but it was at SodaCon East. I was sitting there, and I've been thinking about this with Indy, and Brent Pritchard was there, and I kind of said, I think I want to do this idea, and I asked Indy, how much would that cost, and she told me and I'm like, this is the silliest use of, silliest thing, but I'm actually going to do this. And it was really, talking to them and thinking about how it would actually work, and those pictures. And there was just, I don't know, just some of those pictures spoke to me. And I really, because my events, they're not down at Castleton. Joseph Russick, I think you once said, like, you used a word, but like, I can't create the authenticity in my house. Like, I have brick walling up. I use a wrap, but like, I have to just pick little things that inspire the thought around them. And so this was really kind of from that. And then, and I really, from all, I saw how much care you put into your invitations. And I realized from the very first invitation I sent out for the first festival, which included a moonstone in it, that there is an experience of getting the invitation. Like, that's part of the event, is getting the invitation, reading what's happening. In the first event, it was holding a moonstone, which is depicted in the comic. And, so again, like from what I observed with the Hearth events, it's like, that's part of the experience that gets the excitement going. And these are things, like I said, this is my first time wax stamping. I never thought of those things, and I really enjoy it. In fact, I didn't use it, but here's the copper wax. I now know how to use a wax seal, and it was just true. In fact, here is my first successful seal. I went through so many unsuccessful efforts. That was my first one.
Fantastic.
So yeah, so that I never before. I think it was the first one in Austin was really the first invitation that I saw. I was like, this is just getting the invitation is an experience, and so I wanted to replicate that. So yeah, that's some backstory on the comic, and I do have some left, and there's a PDF, and it is. I've actually only flipped through it once, and it's for a very, I don't know if it's quite vain. I don't read my own stuff. I have never looked at my dissertation, even though I have behind me a whole box of books that I've written, that I've authored. I don't read them because I know I will find a typo, and it will drive me crazy. So,
That's great.
and I know if I read it, I'll find something. So actually, and even though I have writing credit, Indy helped a ton with that. I laid out, I still have the PowerPoint, of course. I had to do everything in PowerPoint. The layout of kind of how I thought the story would go, and the words, or at least the ideas I wanted to get through. But she helped a lot with kind of like, you don't want to do it that way. Trust me, do it this way. And of course she was right. Or, here's some language. I mean, there were some lines where we didn't have 4 lines of text. So I was like, how do I rewrite what I want to say so it only takes up 3 lines of text? So it was a really fun, I really enjoy that. And I will say it gets me excited. For all my events, they start with an idea. For the first event, it was a feast. For the second event, it was crafting. And for this event, it was this army, essentially. They all have, and as I said, there's one piece of it I really hope we can pull off. They all have something that's like the essence of the event, and the event builds around it. It's like I get inductive and deductive mixed up, but like I start mine with this core idea, and the event grows out of it, rather than kind of figuring out the event and then figuring out the individual, which I will say is incredibly stressful because I don't know actually what the event's going to be when it starts. It has an idea that I'm working with. But the 2 seem to have gone well. I mean, the second one was the focus on crafting. My neighbor's a blacksmith, and I said, man, fletching would be cool. He's like, oh yeah, me and Brian know how to do that. I was like, could you like teach people how to do it? He's like, yeah, that'd be really cool. I'd love to show people how to make arrows. I was like, okay, now we just need to figure out baking. And I was like, hey Joseph, how do you like to teach us all how to bake? Because that would be awesome.
That was an experience.
Intoxicated people baking bread. But I will say some of it did come out well.
I think, what's important is I think everybody learned something, and everybody definitely had fun.
Absolutely. It was a blast. And there was some, and several people actually smith strikers and could start a fire, which was the fourth thing. And Colin and I were talking. So at my events, you get a badge. This is like your name tag, and the little, because I do everything with Legos, and each of those badges represents a skill or something you've accomplished. And I said, we were like, how many people are actually going to be able to successfully make an arrow? Like, we had no idea. We're like, I don't know, 5, 10. I ran out of badges because like everyone, I think 20 people made arrows. And then the real problem was we had targets set up, which I could get there behind me. Again, with Lori's help, though this year I've figured out how to do it. I made plotter size, so 36 inches by about 40-inch targets of old Ultima 7 images. So if you think of the monsters in Ultima 7, except they're life size, we shot at those, and like everyone hit. Like the arrows people made were really good, and so yeah, like that was just, we had no idea it was gonna be so successful, that people were gonna be into it. Like we didn't know if people were gonna like doing it. Did it, and successfully, and like we spent like hours like shooting arrows. And then a couple of my neighbors down the street, their son came by, and he ended up joining us. That was really, really fun. And like, I guess one thing I would add, there's lots of moments at my events that I kind of remember, but there's always events where at these moments of my events where like I'm a host, so I'm always running around like, hey, can I get you this? Can I get you that? Oh, let me take care of that. Let me set up the next thing. But like, there's these moments where I just look around, and like one of my rooms in my house is full of people like talking and laughing and having fun. And I'm like, this moment is perfect, and I want it to last forever. And I love having those events. Those moments. I love them happening in my house, because it adds to the feel of my house.
Absolutely understand that, and it's critical that you stop and go, wait a second, just let me enjoy this. It's critical to notice that. There's always a moment, like it happened at Hobloth 1, happened at Hobloth 2. Alex wasn't at Hobloth 2, but she was at 3. But both Hobloth 1 and 2, there's people just that magical sound that you're talking about. Is my camera focused? Yeah, it was. There's that magical sound that you're talking about, and I said to her both times, just, hey, stop, listen to this. Listen to all these happy people. This is the sound of everything going right. This moment right here is why I've spent all these hours doing this, and just appreciate this for a moment. She's like, I have to pee or something. But it's yeah.
This is important.
It is like, Joseph, I saw you posted that you've been tracking your hours. I do not do that, partially because I don't want to know the answer. Until I had no idea like how much I was going to have to put into it, time-wise, financially, and it's not a complaint. I'm happy to do it. It's but it is like, I mean, that's one of the reasons I kind of enjoy it, is like it's as complex as the most like multi-million-dollar projects I've run in my professional career. Like there's so many moving parts and so much unpredictability, but it's also really fulfilling and really, I mean, I enjoy parts of it. Like there's definitely parts I enjoy more than others. I keep looking around because I'm like, there's something I can grab real quick, but they've been really inspirational. I didn't know if there'd be a third one. Actually, the third one, again, I know I've talked to a couple people, was going to be a very small dinner party, because I still want to do that, but again, everyone's coming out, so I can't do lobster and caviar for 30 people, unfortunately. One day I will do that.
Food is a big draw for me, because Hobloth 1 for me was all about the food. Hobloth 2, I can't make it about the food, and
yeah.
It's the economy of scale that you mentioned earlier, and it's also a function of there's no place for me to cook on property unless I want to do campfire cooking. And again, it's got 100 people there or more. So, you know, Hobla or for Festival of the Silver Serpent 2, I was totally looking forward to the food. And, you know, I'm always like, one of my favorite memories of Festival of the Silver Serpent 2 was staying up all night eating leftover meat. I mean, it was just, I was in pain. I could not eat anymore, but I couldn't stop eating. It was just, oh.
So the second festival, and this was, you know, because the focus was on crafting, I had some of the food catered from a food truck, a guy who does smoking. And yeah, so whenever I plan food, I always assume everyone eats like me, which I've learned is not the case. So there's just an obscene amount of food, you know, ribs and something. And I think it was around 1 or 2 a.m. when Rustic Eye and my neighbor, Fergus Ironhand, were up. And I don't even remember what happened. I was like, a tray of brisket I haven't even pulled out. And we're like, well, we've got to eat it now. And just like, out comes a tray of brisket. And that is like, that's kind of, as I said, I've done dinner parties. I like having the food seem endless, and it's not like a gluttonous thing. Well, I hope it's not. It's like, I want people to always have new and different things to try. I like them to eat and drink things they've never eaten or drank before, and not to feel like they have to restrain themselves, which is why at this event, I don't even remember, Rustic, like where the meat and cheese tasting event, how that spawned. I'd have to go back and read our chat logs, but you know, that was one of it where I was like, I love meat, I love cheese, I love putting them together on crackers. But I'd actually know very little about it. You know, I will fund a meat and cheese event, and so that, you know, this year was much more kind of, I think of the theme. One of the strategies this year is like, I'm going to do fewer things, but I'm going to try and invest more time and money into each of them. So, you know, the comic, the invitation, a couple of the key events, and things like that. And some of this is, you know, every time a survey is learning, like what do people respond to? What do I enjoy? And it's interesting. I've literally gotten the exact opposite comment. Like, I loved X. I really didn't care for X. It was too much was spent on it. And I was like, and it's not like I'm not upset about that. It's like, it's interesting just how different what people draw out of the event and what they experience and what they find very personal to them. And that's, I mean, to me, that's part of the fun.
You know, I think as an event planner, designer, whatever, one of the most heartbreaking moments is, I wanted to do this thing. I had this vision for this thing. I did this thing. The thing went well. It was a fantastic, great thing. Everyone hated the thing. You know, those are the moments that are heartbreaking, and that happens sometimes.
There's definitely things that I've like stressed over and spent tons of time trying to get perfect. And every year I try not to. I say every time, this is only my third time. I'm like, no one is even going to notice X, and yet I'm freaking out about it. And then it's something that for me was kind of a throwaway that everyone responds to, and the only thing I can compare it to is when, you know, my wedding, the things I was worried people would freak out about and no one noticed. So yeah, I try not to stress, but at the end of the day, I figure I put enough food and drink and silliness and boffer swords out, people will have a good time.
I can't think of anybody who was unhappy at the 2 events that I've been to. So, you know, along those lines, I'm getting some noise from over here. It's very distracting. So along those lines, questions that I like to think about, I love hypothetical questions, you know, would you rather type questions. If you had more money, not infinite money, you know, that might be the next question, but if you had more money, more time, let's say you had 2 months off, no responsibilities except the event, what would you do? What would you want to do that you can't do now because real life exists?
So by far my biggest constraint right now is the fact that I use my house, which is, I love my house, but I have other people who live here, whose opinion I care about. And so the biggest constraint by far for my event is this moment right now where I'm a week away and I can't really start setting up. if I could have my house for a month ahead of time, there's so much more production I could do in terms of setting up scaffolding, AV. I did some projection at midnight during the last event. I would love to do tons of that stuff. I'd build battlements on my house. So my biggest constraint is actually that. Money. This is something and thank you very much for those who do donate. This is something I do as something I want to give to the community. So I always want it to be free, and I always I'm very fortunate that my job affords me the ability to do so. But I very sincerely, those who do donate, it means a tremendous amount, because I make a budget and I'm terrible about it. Because I'm always like, well, I know Joseph said I only need 8 ounces of this cheese, but I could get 16 ounces, and that would be better. So money's not a constraint. Time is a huge constraint. I literally work 3 jobs, and all of them are rather time consuming. I'm a consultant on the side. I stay pretty busy, and I do actually have a wife and kids that I spend a lot of time with. So if I had a whole bunch of money, probably the first thing I would do is I would, like, here in Maryland, like, get an old Victorian mansion or something and, like, rent it for a month so I could do all my staging and setup and design there. And I would, if I had, and I would probably get a team of people, Rustic, kind of like you have wisely figured out that I wish I had thought of earlier. I would get a team of people and say, hey, I'm going to pay you all, 10 grand to come out here for a month and help me design this. Because there are things I would like to explore setting up in terms of making the world.
Is anybody else losing Drayson or just me?
It's not just you.
Yeah, it cut out for me too.
Uh-oh, I think we have a frozen Drayson.
Yeah, his screen seems to have locked hard.
Oh, so his browser was crashing earlier. You guys may have seen him coming in and out of the chat.
He is unseen and unheard.
Indeed.
He is the unheard avatar.
So, well, hopefully he'll make it back in here in a minute. Hobbit, you were at the last 2 events. Would you care to? Oh wait, Drayson, are you back?
I'm back. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Shit happened. That's what happened.
What was the question that Hobbit is answering?
No, I just wanted to comment. You were talking about how giddy we were receiving the invitation, the graphic novel. It's the equivalent of, in 1985, opening that Ultima 4 box. It has a cloth map and a metal ankh in it. That's not usual for games of that time, but it's that same equivalent tactile feeling of, oh, all this new stuff to discover and play with.
I'm going to take that a step further. While 100% yes, everything you just said, imagine, though, that when you bought Ultima 5, you're in the fucking book. I mean,
Right.
that's a level of coolness that I cannot express without saying fucking a lot.
I was freaking out. I told my daughter, I told my wife, it's like, look, I'm in a graphic novel. And then I was extremely flattered that Indy did not draw my full figure in it either. She made me rather handsome.
So generous with my fat. I was like, thank you so much.
I'm very pleased that it had that effect on you. My only complaint is she was not so kind with my baldness.
Now you can have
We are large men. We must accept this.
So sorry, I'm having some
bald spot.
connection issues. So anyway, to answer your question, Joseph, it would be, if I had a bunch of money, it would basically be able to get another place that I could stage and set up, so I could do more production around the areas that I think are weak in what I do, just because of the natural constraints I have. We have these multi-million-dollar old old 200-year-old mansions. I was like, if I could host an event there, have a month to set up, plan, design stories, pyrotechnics, etc. That would be awesome.
Along those lines,
and
people have asked, would you like to do one in Europe? We can get a castle. And my answer has always been no. But that was back when the only really big event that I'd run was Hobloth 2. And for Hobloth 2, what you may or may not know is I lived at Castleton basically for like 2 weeks before the event, just setting shit up. And I said, I couldn't do one in Europe because I'm not going to have access to the venue ahead of time. But Hobloth 3 was actually a proof of concept where we got in, we set up, we got out because we had to, because there were people there before us and people there after us. And so, granted, I don't know how to get a moving truck full of props to Europe. I think it could be done. If you wanted to step it up and do the mansion, I think it could be done, especially if you have a team of good people to help set up.
I will say the most insane part of, I spend months and months and months, probably about 4 months planning and designing. The most insane part of the festivals, and this year's gonna be crazy because people are arriving earlier on Friday, and I asked, I wanted them to, is the couple hours between when my family always is gone this weekend. That's why I use this weekend. They're at an event my wife always takes the kids to for the weekend. It's the couple hours after they leave before people arrive when I can do the final crazy setup, and then the few hours after the event ends before they have to get back, that everything has to be back basically how it was. Those couple hours are insane. But everyone, I will say it's survived. I think it was the first one or the second one. There were a bunch of people here helping. It's like suddenly furniture has all been moved, and things are out of the way, and rooms have been completely reconfigured. And then 2 hours after the event, they've all been reconfigured back, and every vase is back where it was, and every picture is exactly where it was.
Well, I can definitely say that, we know this, but it's a great core group of people that goes to these events. Back when I did Hobloth 1, I said, don't worry about the dishes, put them in the sink. You guys all go home, I'll do them later. I woke up to the dishes completely done because Indy decided she was doing the dishes. And, I think someone else helped, but I can't remember who. But, basically they took it upon themselves to do the dishes for, 30 people. And it wasn't just like one dish per person either. I mean, it was feast level dishes. So it was, there's generally a good group of people there. So we've got 3 or 4 minutes left before we should start going down into closing toasts. Does anybody have a question for Unseen before I make a small announcement? As Hellgraph just leaves. Well, no questions for you. So, we talked about the really cool Unseen Order symbol. For those of you that know about Hobloth 4, know that Unseen is one of the 3 people that I've asked to help be quest designers, specifically because of the great quests that he has brought in the past to Hobloth 3 and the stuff that he's done for the Festival of the Silver Serpent. I thought it would be perfect for him to help make the quest for Hobloth 4, in addition to Indy, the person who illustrated the graphic novel, and Golden Flame, who could not be with us tonight, but is apparently occasionally shouting things at the screen. And I wonder if he's yelling at clouds too. But one of the things that I plan to have at Hobloth 4 is tapestries everywhere of everyone's logos and their sigils and stuff. Not the attendees, but the contributors. So if you've been to Hobloth 2 or 3, there's always the giant cloth map in the middle, and then you got on either side Richard's snake symbol. This year I want to also have things for Unseen Order and Tortoise and Hare and the like. Of course, this thing just has to be folded, right? So what's really cool, when you actually go and get something made, it's kind of marginal to get a second one made. So this is not the one that will be at Hobloth, but this is one that the Hearth had made actually this will be going with me and the Hearth of Britannia next weekend to Drayson's. So this will be a donation from the Hearth of Britannia, kind of a, I don't know what you call it, but it's a gift from the Hearth of Britannia to the Unseen Order. So your very own awesome logo tapestry to hang up at your event. And of course, I'll make another one for my event because I want one too, right? It's cool. It's a cool symbol. I put this on my wall. But yeah, so the Hearth will be bringing this for next week, and that's
Thank
really
you very much.
Oh, absolutely! It's super exciting. But out there, Indy and Golden Flame, don't forget, I need symbols from you. I've asked for symbols. There's a reason I've asked for symbols. There's going to be banners hanging at the event with your symbol on it. So
I can submit a symbol for them.
yeah, it's like I've run events before where I said, if you don't, I need your name, your character name, and a little bio. And if you don't give me one, I'll write one for you. You've got until this time. So yeah, you've got until October 1st to give me a symbol, or I'm picking one for you. I will probably be nice. Hello, Kit.
I will actually. There's one thing I will share as I don't think it's really a spoiler, but since you had brought up my neighbor, he had his own drink created. Since I had there's an event around it, but I will give me one moment. I will get that and show that.
Ooh, exciting! So I am definitely excited for this event. Those of you, I think I'd say it's absolutely 100% too late to register for this event. So I'm sorry that all of you out there in YouTube land are being teased by description of this wonderful event. But if there is a Festival of the Silver Serpent 4, hopefully you'll keep your eyes peeled for it. It's always a fantastic time. Hobbit has a great time. It's one of the few places that I feel comfortable drinking to excess. And I just have this problem just not being in control. I don't feel safe. I feel sloppy. I get embarrassed. One of the interesting things when I drink is if I drink too much, I feel embarrassed. And that takes the fun out of it. But the Festival of the Silver Serpent is one of the few people, or rather the few times ever, where I feel like I can do that and not be judged, and I'm safe. And I'm, as I tweeted the other day, a week ago, I said, in 2 weeks, I get to go home for a weekend. And yeah, the Festival of the Silver Serpent, probably even more so than my events because I don't have to do any work. The Festival of the Silver Serpent is in many ways the most at home that I feel probably anywhere. But Drayson is back. What is this spoiler?
So this is something my neighbor. He has his own whiskey at the event. It's actually Scotch. Sorry.
So cool.
Hobbit is quivering.
It packs a punch. It is a 12-year distilled single malt from Minot.
Staring intensifies.
So yes, I had fun with that.
I'm looking forward.
My room is filled with an uncomfortable amount of alcohol.
I remember.
In my office.
How is that even possible?
Uncomfortable amount. It's you're sweating from it.
It's probably 3 cases of liquor, a good deal of beer and wine. It's a lot.
I remember at Festival of the Silver Serpent 2, there was a moment like, "Hey, do you drink whiskey?" And it's like, "Not really." "Well, I've got some Blue Label here." "Well, I drink whiskey." I was just like, "Well, I don't mind if I do." It was a fantastic moment.
So this event, I have tried to gather the beer somewhat, but certainly the wine and the liquor. I have tried to target kind of unusual and different. Again, I like people to try things that they haven't tried before, and a lot of these I've never tried.
Hot dog cocktails.
So, oh God, please no. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to that I think it is Saturday late night after Dom shows off his new game, which I'm freaking crazy excited to see.
That's
the
fantastic.
Private Reserve. So I'm excited to share that.
Wonderful. Well, I would gladly talk about this, until the event. But I know that you have things to do for the event. I have to do things for my event. We are both scrambling like mad. I'm trying desperately to get registration open for my event. So as I released the hours the other day for my event, I just passed 100 hours, and 70 some odd of those hours has been website stuff. Granted, 20 to 30 of it was wasted because I was wanting to migrate the Hearth of Britannia to WordPress, making a custom WordPress theme, and just so much shit went wrong. I eventually said, fuck it. So 30 hours. Moral of the story, remember, don't cling to a bad idea just because you've spent time on it. So yeah, there you go. But that being said, it is also time for us to wrap up so we can have a little after rabble and then get back to work. We are both busy. But I want to absolutely say, thank you for coming and talking about the event. I know you come to the Dragonsmeets anyway, but it was fantastic having you here as a featured guest.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for letting me babble for a long time and reminisce, because I actually don't spend enough time doing that.
Absolutely. And, in complete antithesis of what the Unseen Order is about, I had to tell the world that I was giving you this. I am the public-facing branch of Ultima community stuff. I have to, I got to social. I have to share and all that fun stuff, marketing. But that brings us to closing toasts. And I think everybody here knows how that works. This is Hobbit's first time in a Dragonsmeet. But for some reason, I have a sneaking suspicion, and I'm not sure why, but I don't think Hobbit's going to have any trouble making a closing toast. But though it is his first time in a Dragonsmeet, tradition dictates that he goes second to last, whereas the Hearth always goes last. So I'm going to take this from right to left. Actually, you know what? Let's take this in order of beard. Let's look. Hellgraph, you've got maybe a bit of stubble there. So Hosey, you've got nothing. You absolutely got nothing. So you go first.
Yeah, I freshly shaved. So to the Hearth, to the festival, to the sacrifice, to virtues.
To events and sacrifice. All right, Hellgraph, you've got a little stubble, so you're beating Kevin in terms of the naked faceness. So you are next.
Yeah, I shaved yesterday, so you done got beat me out by a real thin margin. That's it. So life and all the things worth enjoying in it.
It's life. All right, Kevin, your proto beard.
Yes. Let's see, because it's something I've been slaving over for some time and fantasizing about for even more time, to 240p, because anything less would be civilized.
How apt.
One of the best resolutions ever made. And Hobbit, I think you understand what's going on here, and I would also think that... Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped Drayson. Sorry, I got excited. Drayson, it's to you with your manly beard.
Really just to the whole community who has given me an excuse to do the events that have brought me a lot of joy, and I just looking forward to seeing everyone, most of you next week, and many who I will not see next week. I will see you in November, and I look forward to these like nothing else. It is how I rejuvenate myself. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. To rejuvenation. All right. Now, Hobbit. And I do think if we're going in beard order, if your beard looks what I imagined it, I think we're still going in beard order.
You are correct. I'm sporting a full beard now, but just not quite as long as yours.
Yes, this is perfect. All right.
It lined up right.
I hope to achieve full wizard status by Hobloth 4.
Since I don't have a camera, I will let you know that I'm drinking Real Ale's Devil's Backbone, a surprisingly light and crisp beer, but with a 7.8% alcohol level. So,
that sounds.
I'd like to toast to this family. I found a chosen family, and as Joseph said, that this is inspiration. It's recharging. It is rejuvenation. the thought of all of the avatars, the dragons that I have as friends and as a chosen family inspires me every day and keeps me going. And I thank all of you, and I appreciate all of us living by and believing in the virtues. Cheers.
To family and our chosen family, and to the virtues. And as tradition dictates, the hearth toasts last. And I would just like to reiterate what I said earlier about the festivals of the Silver Serpent, and how, you know, in a week I get to go home for a weekend. That's really how I feel. You know, the Moon Gate doesn't open for us anymore unless we open it ourselves. You know, Origin was shut down, and we definitely have Shroud of the Avatar. We can choose to go through the Lunar Rift, but there are those of us who feel most at home going through the Red Moon Gate, and it will not open for us anymore unless we open it ourselves. So thank you to Unseen for opening the Red Moon Gate so I can get home every once in a while and feel really happy. So to Red Moon Gates, and to going home, to home.
To home.
Indeed.
And this has been another Hearth of Britannia Dragonsmeet. I am Rustic Dragon. We had with us tonight Hobbit Dragon, Hellgraph, Houston Dragon, Unseen Dragon, and Boolean Dragon. It has been a fantastic Dragonsmeet talking about sacrifice and the Unseen Order. If you are watching this after the fact and you have any thoughts about this, please feel free to email me, rusticdragon@gmail.com. Everything you need to know about the Hearth of Britannia is available at hearthofbritannia.com. Please consider backing the Hearth of Britannia on Patreon, where you can have access to insider stuff and spoilers and behind the scenes and input on the stuff that the Hearth does next. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. And even if you don't back us on Patreon, thank you for watching. Thank you for participating, and thank you for caring and reaching out to all of us, helping us do the things that we do. So have a great night, walk in virtue, all that fun stuff, and we will see you in approximately 2 weeks. Bye.